Yo, what's up, everybody, and welcome to the Web3 Gaming Show. We're here to uncover the amazing world of Web3 gaming and hear from the people who are creating and pioneering its future. We'll be exploring the stories of game developers, community builders, content creators, and industry experts. Join us as we dive into the ever-growing Web3 gaming space and learn more about the movers and shakers of this very exciting space. On this week's episode of the Web3 Gaming Show, I am beyond excited to talk to the man, the myth, the legend, Gabby, and the co-founder of Yield Guild Network. YGG is the first and biggest Web3 gaming guild where you can make friends, discover games, and level up. Gabby, how are you doing today?
Hey, thanks for having me. Web3 gaming is a topic I like to talk about.
Definitely, same here. And I know we're going to dive very deep into it today, and so I'm very excited. I actually saw you at GDC coming out of one of the networking events, standing there. We didn't have a chance to say hi, but how was GDC for you? What were some of your main takeaways from the event?
GDC was so energizing. I think the biggest some people have had about Web3 is that like where's the good games, and I think GDC answered that those games are coming. Of course, it takes a while to make a good game. A typical kind of dev time towards release is probably anywhere between 18 to 24 months or more. And with the games that have been funded by experienced developers who've been developing their games within like from last year to most of this year, I think some of them were ready to show off what they have. And yeah, I think GDC was great.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. There obviously, I think, was a change of narrative as well, which is great for us. And I think moving forward, we'll just continue to change. I would love to learn more about, ultimately your background for those who aren't familiar with who you are, what you've done, and ultimately what led you to where you are today. Would love to give a brief overview of that, and then ultimately, then we can dive into all the amazing things you're doing for the space today.
Sure. So, very quick background. I grew up in the Philippines, mainly played PC games for most of my life. And I've always known from a very early age that I wanted to make games. So, started making games roughly 20 years ago, was part of the team that made the first ever game out of the Philippines, transitional games with my own studio in 2014. And then found Ethereum in 2017 because Ethereum and the concept of smart contracts was a way to program value, and we already programming economies, right? Designing economy, virtual economies in the games that we're doing. So I thought it was really interesting as a way to program real value into a game. And in late 2017, CryptoKitties came out and popularized the term NFT, non-fungible token. And I thought, holy shit, this is it. And so yeah, I went to GDC in 2018 and started talking about NFTs. There were very few back then who were either willing to listen or actually understood what we were talking about. So
Right.
yeah, just made a few friends in the crypto space, like Jiho of Axie, Devin and Alex of OpenSea, the CryptoKitties guys, Marguerite Luckade. Like there were very few people back then, and yeah, started playing Axie later. I started playing around with the different use cases of NFTs. And I was still playing Axie in 2020 when the lockdown hit. And yeah, basically, people started flocking to Axie because the, I guess the play to earn model with the SLP tokens of proof that you play the game and a match before you could earn a token. And because that game resource was tokenized, that means that people could basically sell that or give that to someone else. And that's actually how I learned a lot of my early lessons in DeFi in 2020, learning how to use Uniswap, learning how to use MakerDAO. Those were lessons because of Axie Infinity. And the best thing about Axie at that time was that the community organically figured out how to lend their assets to others. So
Right.
Axie became really known for the lending or the scholarship model. And yeah, it wasn't something that they invented. It was the community kind of building permissions on top of the assets that were there. And when we saw that, we said, I think this is something that we could scale. And yeah, that was the start of YGG.
That's amazing. I think, I've been following you for a while. There's always been an emphasis on helping those create opportunities within game economies and the opportunities that game economies can create for these individuals. Can you speak a little bit more about that and the passion you have for that?
Yeah, so coming from developing world in the Philippines, where I guess it's harder to have access to capital, even for your startup or your business, or have good jobs. It was amazing to me that real value can be created in the game economy, and people could benefit from that. And like the big question in the last is sustainability of that model, and I think that how people are designing games, giving out value in the games is changing a lot. So I think that model is changing to where it could indeed be more sustainable. But the core idea that you can match people in virtual economies with the stuff that they like to do, and this is not anything that's new. Like this is something that EVE Online was doing like over 20 years ago. Any from world like in games like World of Warcraft or RuneScape, etc., you have people that kind of self-organize, then get into specialized tasks. There are probably people who have more capital than time, and more people who have more time and skill than capital, and these basically get grouped into guilds, right? So being able to do this within virtual economies that have real value, aka like Web3 games, is something that I still feel is like incredible, and I'm really just happy that I get to do this every day.
No, I couldn't agree more. Let's dive a little bit further into YGG. I know that you all had a lot of changes even after GDC, and so would love for you to give a quick overview of what Yield Guild is exactly, and how are you ultimately changing that to push the Web3 gaming space forward.
Sure. Yeah. So first of all, right, we're a guild of Web3 gamers. That hasn't changed from the start. I guess the way that we've expressed that, or we connect community with virtual economies, has been evolving as well in the last couple of years. We started with a organizing in other games. For example, we have a guild DAO within League of Kingdoms, which has been operating for 2 years. Also, we have a bunch of assets and a multi-sig with a DAO where the players control what happened with the assets, and that has been quite active for a little bit over 2 years as well. And yeah, we've started buying assets in different games, and then basically having our in different ways. And in 2021 to 22, we started building out kind of global guild network. At its core is a very local thing. It's the people who are closest to the ground. So we've partnered with different guilds, which we don't control directly, but are overall part of the YGG network. So from the Philippines, YGG, Southeast Asia, Japan, SkyGG in Korea, IndieGG in India, OlaGG in Latam, a couple of others that we're working with. And we wanted to make sure that we have a network of Web3 gamers all around the world. And the expat is kind of different. Like some of them are more focused on esports, for example. Some want to work with creators. The Philippines has a lot of really good talent that end up being like community managers and moderators and early beta testers in a lot of these games. So in the last year plus, we've been focusing a lot more on product, and we've been developing what is basically like Web3 gamer reputation via soulbound token achievements. So this has been ongoing since last year. We launched a program called GAP, or Guild Advancement Program, that gets our community to play different Web3 games, do quests in these games, and then get soulbound tokens, so non-transferable NFT achievements for the stuff that they've done, either within a game or within the community. And the goal of this is for players to really basically create their Web3 gamer resume and say like I've done in Web3. When a player goes into a game, or when even like they're trying to get a whitelist or a mint, people are asking, are they quote unquote real gamers? What have they done? What have they contributed? Are they trying to flip assets? Are they here to extract? And I think that gamer reputation just really solves a lot of those problems. Now you can see exactly what people have done by the reputation achievement stack that they have, and you have the ability to give targeted quests or cards. Like if you're targeting an esports player, for example, or someone who is good at another game of the same genre, then you have the ability to do that with gamification.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely been a big problem in terms of being able to find those quote unquote real gamers, right? Can you discuss a little bit more about those obstacles that YGG has faced and how have you overcome them, and or how do you plan on overcoming them in the future?
Right. Well, I guess what everyone has gone through was like the market downturn, right? And in a way, it's healthy, of course, because I think the market was overheated at the end of 2021. That said, it hasn't been easy for anyone in the market. A lot of companies blew up last year. Fortunately, we've been able to stay strong, raise a little bit more money to focus on product last year. And I think that at the end of the day, the core service that we have, that we bring in community with the games, is something that's relevant, and we just want to be able to do this and scale it out, yeah, with the products that we're building.
So it sounds like you're really kind of focused on finding product market fit within YGG outside of like the traditional scholar model. Can you speak on that a little bit more? I know you talked about the reputation system. Is there anything else in
Yeah,
place? And how does YGG look like moving forward in the future? How do you envision it
yeah,
ultimately coming together in 5 years, if you have
yeah.
that already?
Oh no, no, I've always thought of like what is the like 10 to 15 to 20-year goal for YGG. So we'll be around for a while, but I've always liked to say that when we started YGG, there was already a, I would say, community market fit on top of Axie, what we're doing. So we already knew there was a demand, and the expression of that demand then was via the scholarship program in Axie. And the market has changed a lot since then. The business models have shifted, but the core proposition of, yeah, connecting certain gamers with games, and in Web2, this is just called user acquisition, right?
Right.
Um, but I think that in Web3, acquisition is different because you're not just sending eyeballs to games and getting paid for an
Mm,
install. These are community members who want to be recognized for what they've done, what they've contributed, and what's that worth to them. We're not just giving up our data to an entity like Facebook and getting nothing in return. Web3 is about
mm,
ownership, and I think it represents, I would say, more long-term relationship between
mm,
a user, or in Web3, a community member, and the games, right? Especially with
right.
games with actual economies around them. You have the ability to have players, like, for example, the players in League of Kingdoms for the YGG, they've been at it for 2 years. And
Hmm.
as long as there's a viable economy and they enjoy playing with their friends, they're probably going to be there for years on end, right? And I think that's what it's really about. And of course, this is not going to work without games that really people enjoy playing and are willing to spend
Right.
money on. And I think that we're closer to getting there today. Yeah, I think that YGG's place in that is like philosophically still the same as it's been.
Mm. How would you say that you said that, you have visions for 10, 15 years? Like, what does that look like to you?
so the so I read a lot of sci-fi, and one of the books that I really like is Freedom by Daniel Suarez. So go look that up. And
Well,
Freedom is basically a book that has an RPG overlay over real life. And I feel like that's actually what we're doing. I feel like, 10 years from now, or probably even earlier, you'll wake up, you'll connect your wallet, and like it, your wallet gets scanned, and then you get presented with opportunities in the virtual world. Like, oh, you have this guild affiliation that enables you for a mission in this game, or player, you're whitelisted in this game, and this is the payout if you win. And I think that that could be what the future is like. And if you think about what's happening in the world today, the pace of like technological progress and acceleration is just going faster,
yeah,
especially with all of the advancements in AI. And a lot of the jobs that we know today probably might not exist 5 years from now. And
right.
what are these people going to do? They're gonna be hanging out in virtual worlds, playing games. Some of them will look like jobs. Some of them will be, I don't know, they'll be gladiators, right? They'll be in esports, and they'll be participating in the virtual economy and earning rewards there. So I think that AI actually accelerates the future that we're headed towards.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So obviously you have YGG in the middle of that, right? Do you think that YGG, what YGG is today, looks similar to what it will look like when that future does arise? And then as a follow-up question, how many scholars do you have today, and like how does that ultimately evolve once that future comes to life?
Honestly, we're not even tracking scholar number anymore because like it it it's we've emphasized more on, I would say, competitive play. So there's still people who are renting assets from us in different ways. For example, Genopets has a rental model, and like games like ev.io, you don't need an NFT to play it, but if you have the NFT, then you have the right to mint skins, which I think is a very cool model. It's not exactly a scholarship model, but so that's why we don't track it anymore. But like you're always gonna need some assets, and we still collect those
Mm,
assets in games like, for example, Digidaigaku, Castaways, and I do think that some form of rental model will still be relevant in the future. But scholarships as a metric is not as important anymore because the games have largely moved away from that business model.
right. You talked about user acquisition. Nick, our CEO of ReNFT, and I, when we were going through to GDC, that's what every single game developer talked about: user acquisition, discoverability. How do you plan on pushing that forward with YGG? I know you talked a little bit more about it, but would love to dive into deeper. What's going to happen? How do you see that evolving? And I think that's going to be one of the major pain points that games have in the upcoming years.
Yeah, definitely. I was a game developer seeing how user acquisition evolved in free to play, and it just scaled massively. And the players who could like jump on user acquisition early and kind of figured out how to do it. People like Gabe Ladon when he was at Machine Zone.
Right.
Supercell's also very good at user acquisition. Obviously, like they were the ones that were able to benefit massively. And interestingly, that whole like it was kind of gone down to science. Apple broke it with the IDFA targeting rules,
Right.
but now in Web3, like that science doesn't exist. That whole workflow doesn't exist. So now there's a lot of jockeying between a lot of entities, guilds included, that realize that the Web3 user acquisition is still not like the road is not paved there, and there's a lot of value to be made if you're able to connect people who are willing to pay for, yeah, users, and yeah, the people in Web3 that are willing to do these tasks in the game. So I think it's incredibly exciting. If you look at the history of user acquisition, you had banner ads that were paid, via CPM or CPC, and
Right.
I think there's a lot of install ads in Web2. I think that in Web3 you'll be seeing the core ad units in the form of quests.
Mm,
Quest means do this, get that. So we're doing a quest system as well because we think that being able to deliver quests that matter to games, and matching it with players that care about them, hence our achievement stack, is something that is going to be incredibly valuable.
yeah, most definitely. How does YGG today capture those players? I know that you're not kind of necessarily focused on the scholarship model now. Now you're kind of targeting everyday players. How does that look like for you on a day-to-day basis?
So we want to get players who can basically play these games and fill out achievements. So the these games, not all of them are financially motivated. And I think actually status and recognition is an amazing driver for games as well. And yeah, and achievements are our way of doing that. And achievements are very powerful in Web3, even more so than, for example, in Xbox or in Steam, because once
Mm,
they're there in your wallet, you own that achievement. It's permanent, and you can kind of go out and show everyone that like these are the achievements I have, and everyone can recognize them. And what's cool about Web3 is that when you put an asset on chain, then like it becomes composable. So your achievement stack, your reputation can be used by other protocols, and they can remix and create either token achievement gated stuff. They can create new insights or applications on top of that. So having achievements or reputation kind of as a core primitive to build in Web3, I think is very powerful and has a lot of future even beyond gaming.
yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think a lot of what I've seen in terms of how can you use that into the real life is, can you create some sort of credit score of someone who's been in these kind of like gaming ecosystems to then kind of provide them with more financialization opportunity or financial opportunities? Can you speak about your vision for that a little bit more? Because I do think that I've seen a little bit of that pushing, but obviously I think we
Yeah,
need more robust economies
yeah.
before we can
I
really get
think
there.
the I think I don't think this is in the near future, but the one of the ultimate expressions of this would be for your reputation to be so valuable that you can take out a loan with your reputation as your collateral. Like you'll be so afraid of getting the achievement that says like I didn't repay my loan, right? And for everyone to see that and then cutting you off basically from the rest of credit options that you want to make sure that you can repay that loan. I don't think we're going to be there for a number of years. It's the problem with under collateralized lending right now. So it's just easy to run away and kind of rug the loan rather than try to repay it. Maybe if prices go down or terms go bad, and I think that reputation has to be powerful enough where you would not want your reputation, so you'd rather repay, right?
I see. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think, as you mentioned, when things can become composable because of everything's on the blockchain, that's when things start getting really exciting because things just
Yeah.
kind of exponentially grow. I understand that you were a part of the game industry, right? Starting your own studio in the past. And as you know, like Web3 gaming is not only just Web3, it's also gaming. So I would love to hear your thoughts on the general gaming market, ultimately how Web3 fits into that in the future, and why does gaming excite you so much? I think that that's an easy answer for some, but I think that it's something important to dive into all the time.
Yeah, general gaming market. I think that everyone Web 2 plus Web 3 gaming had a boost during COVID. A lot of that has gone down as just life has returned to normal and we can leave the house again and we actually like real life, right? So the gaming market overall is a bit down. Free to play is in a really weird place right now because the user acquisition stack is broken. So inadvertently, I think Apple has forced free to play developers to look at other alternatives, including Web3. And interestingly, where Web3 gaming is heading is basically a mix of free to play at the top of funnel because you want to get millions of gamers and you want to have them start playing. You want to retain those users even before you show a single NFT to them, right?
Mm,
So I think most of the games going forward are not going to be showing the Web3 portion up front, but they're going to be using Web3 as a way to retain users much longer with the power of ownership, with the power of community. Yeah, group play plus ownership, I think, is one of the most powerful things in the world. I think
mm,
Eve has shown that, where people have been there
mm.
for over a decade, and being able to do that with assets you truly own, that you play, you build together with your friends, basically. I think that's kind of the ultimate sticky point of Web3. And now you have assets that could be worth, I don't know, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars, who know, that you actually own in these economies. And I think that's just going to be a powerful driver. But I think it's a powerful driver on the back end, meaning
Right.
you still need to acquire users, you still need to get them to play and enjoy before they start caring about those assets, right? So we don't want to kind of have the financialization assets kind of be front and center. You want people to enjoy experience, be part of a virtual economy, and then once they realize that they own these assets, it's going to be like they're never going to leave, right? It's going to be a powerful driver to get people to stay in these worlds.
Right. What is a game today, Web 2 or Web 3, that like keeps you going, like keeps you coming back, even if it's ownership or not ownership on the blockchain?
The latest game I've been very into, and my closest friends know this, is Marvel Snap, because I've always been, I would say, the last 10 years, more of a mobile gamer. I played a lot of Hearthstone. I played a lot of Magic the Gathering back in the day, and that's actually what got me into Axie in the first place. I really like
Uh,
trading card games, and Marvel Snap is like a combination of Hearthstone with like a very fast game loop, like clouds, like 3 minute sessions with the Marvel IP. So it's incredibly addicting. I've spent a few $100s in the game there. Honestly, if those were NFTs, I would have spent like
That, yeah, no, I agree, right? Like when you know that you can retain ownership or at least some value of your cards, like it changes the psychology game so much. How do you
For sure.
feel about like these kind of AAA studios entering into the Web3 space? Like, do you think that it's too early for them? Do you think that they like what are the things that they have to learn? Obviously, a lot of them are trying to push into it, including um, Netmarble as well.
Yeah. AAA studios will always be, I would say, second movers. They'd want someone like Axie to go out and show that a new business model exists that is worth it for them to bring their tens of $1 million of development and marketing to. And it also poses specific challenges, like, for example, maybe their current user base may not like NFTs, or there may be legal pushback around regulation. So a ton of risk for large studios, especially publicly listed ones, to really kind of go full Web3. I think that Asia is probably leading on this one. There's a lot of Asian publishers, the big companies that are now following the lead of the smaller studios and really starting to go a lot more, I would say, optimistic on Web3. So I think we're going to see where the business models land ultimately. But yeah, I think that we're going to see a lot of this business model innovation come from Asia. I mean, Asia invented free to play, right? And I think, yeah, I think Asia will be the first to kind of really iterate quickly as well on what the eventual Web3 business models are going to look like.
Right. So I actually want to touch on that with Asia inventing free to play. Through my research, I realized that I think the first game that really somewhat showed this, I think not at the scale that Asia did, was Doom, right? Where you were able to, in a newspaper, get like send
Shareware,
money,
yes, yeah,
get
yeah,
exactly shareware. So
yeah.
like, do you? And obviously, it was like from the States to the Asia, which really popularized it. Then obviously back to the States, which I think also blew up.
Yep.
Do you think that that similar momentum of innovation will happen with Web3? Asia kind of leading the charge, kind of these states coming in and trying to like really push it forward, and then eventually just blowing up everywhere in the world.
I do think so, and I don't think it's just Asia. By the way, there's some incredible game developers in Europe as well. Like some of my favorite game developers are based in the U.S. Gabe Layden of Limit Break, who previously was CEO of Machine Zone, and now leading the development of Digidaigaku. So like, I'm super like bullish on what he's doing, and if you don't believe that, look at my wallet. Also a big fan of Mark Arrow of Azra Games. So he's been an like RPG developer for over a decade, and I got very excited when I got to meet Azra because he made the Star Wars mobile free to play game for EA, and I spent just way too much money in that game. So when I learned that he was the one that developed that and he was making a Web3 RPG, I was like, holy shit, I have to be involved. So yeah, and so there's just a lot of developers, even here in Asia. There's a bunch of really good teams, and you know what? A lot of these teams now are just from all over. You see teams with people in China, and then Singapore, then Helsinki, then Vietnam, a lot of places in the US. So it's actually becoming more and more global these days. And the nice thing about that is you see a lot of the percolation of different kinds of ideas. Also, people playing a lot of games from east and west, everywhere in between. So yeah, I think just that's the beauty of the Web3 market, is that it's just inherently global.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think we both know you are an OG in this space. You've been here since the beginning. How have you seen the industry change since you started, and where do you see it moving forward? You already started talking about these new experiments happening. Maybe, touch on what are those new experiments that you're seeing ultimately, like
Yeah.
be successful or at least be tried.
Yeah. So been in NFT since 2018, and it was a very, I would say, niche hobby. Even within crypto, nobody took NFT seriously until maybe late 2020, early 2021, right? When Axie really took off. And then they proved that a business model existed. The business model then was very early and probably flawed. It had to be iterated upon, but it proved that the business model existed. There was a stat where I think Axie had like made $180 million of marketplace revenue in like lifetime. It was some large amount, and it proved to serious companies, serious businesses, that a business model existed, right? unfortunately, the thing with crypto is that like everything moves fast and you have a lot of reflexivity. There's a lot of reflexivity up, there's a lot of reflexivity down. So when you prove something that works, there's suddenly 100 people that's trying to do the same thing with like small tweaks, some of them better, some of them worse, some of them probably pure cash grab. And like 2021, I would say, was kind of a very noisy time to be in this space. The valuations were really high, all of the tokens were pumping, and like it was due for a correction, right? See last year, and I think we've actually overcorrected. Of course, there's a lot of like big names in crypto that blew up last year, and now there's a lot of negativity in this space. So we want we want it to be at a place where it's more mature, where it's not really kind of yo-yoing up and down, and really proving that like there's a really good use case for having crypto and NFTs in virtual worlds, powering virtual economies, powering the metaverse. So I think that itself is true. But yeah, I think we have to get to a place where there's really good products being built that people are using, want to spend on every day before it stabilizes.
What do you think are the pieces of infrastructure needed to like really successfully move forward in the future? I think we've been able to start building those, but what do you think that we really need to hone in for the future?
Yeah, super good question. It's like, what do you need to get virtual economies to survive, right?
Right,
And
right.
of course, like the first thing was actually like an internet native currency. So we have that in, like crypto, Ethereum, whatever,
Right.
right? Whatever currency, and then having the, I would say, tools so that people could collaborate with each other. So, for
Mhm.
example, like asset rentals is one of them, right? I think it's a very important piece that needs to be there because, like a whale, for example, may have like thousands of assets. They're not going to play with those thousands of assets, and
Right.
so everyone has their different place to play in the economy. There are people that are going to do the work that don't have the assets. There are going to be either companies or whales or guilds that basically gather these assets, right? And then kind of parcel them out. And then I think that governance and reputation are also very important parts that I think are still very early.
Right.
Um, I'm actually very like skeptical of the one token, one vote governance that can be like pretty prone to abuse. So I do think that
Mm,
reputation needs to be built out so that people
mm,
who are really kind of really good contributors, for example, to a DAO can have governance multipliers because you know that they have the best interest. So I think that yeah, governance and reputation go hand in hand. But I think um, probably there's not been a lot of effort built on reputation yet
right.
because like soulbound tokens are not tradable. You can't immediately make money
Mm,
off them. You can't flip them. So it hasn't received as much attention. But I think yeah, it's one of the most important pieces that are missing largely in Web3 today.
right. So there's a lot to unpack there. One of the things I want to unpack is something that I learned when I first entered the gaming industry, which is free to play is pretty much held up by whales, or now the term I think is changing to like big spenders. Like, how do you think that translates to Web3, right? Like, they have more of a financial incentive now. It keeps some of that revenue. Part of the reason why they were spending so much money in the beginning was just for entertainment value. And they were pretty much upholding an entire studio by just spending money. And obviously, like, they themselves might be able to pass on assets to people, helping them get to the top of the leaderboard, which then speaks to your reputation piece, right? If you're number one on the leaderboard, everyone sees that. For me, it was
Yep.
Clash of Clans. Number one, like, I want to be this person. How can I be this person?
Yeah, even the people who were like doing like top 10 leaderboards in Web2 games, when you talk to them, they said that they needed people to play the same game 24/7. People were paid to play that, like top players were being paid to play that account. So that already exists in current like competitive games, right? I think that ultimately what each business model shift does is that it expands the total addressable market. So that's how you went from like paid to subscription gaming, subscription to free to play. And I think from free to play to Web3, you increase the total addressable market because, of course, the fun matters, but now you're not just playing the game only for the entertainment value of fun. And I think this is something that trips up a lot of people. Like, for example, take a game like Eve Online. I'm good friends with the CEO Hilmar, and he says that if you look at the mechanics of Eve Online, it's an incredibly boring game. Like, people click on a button, mine an asteroid, get some resources, and then they take it back to their guild corporation. And the corporate guild corporation is like a full-time accountant to make sure all the different assets. And then they have a small part of that who are actual fighters who go do the actual fighting. But each fight that happens destroys hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of ships. So like, it doesn't happen very often. So a lot of what happens is basically people that are working together to gather resources, to make ships, to threaten each other, and then every now and then a fight breaks out, right? But what makes people stay for like, you know 10, 12 years in this game? Ultimately, it's being able to achieve something together as a group. And the assets are, I would say, kind of denote what those achievements are. Those assets have value, even in Eve Online, which is currently not a Web3 game. You can sell those assets on the black market, gray market, and obtain value for them. And I think that's what's really important for Web3. Now, it even broadens the total addressable market, because you have people who are maybe like hardcore gamers who've stopped playing games because they love business, for example. Like, they think like you're having fun in business, and you couldn't play a game because you feel like you're wasting time. And now you can actually do that and like treat the game as a business and have fun with your friends at the same time. So I think that's in and I think ultimately widens the total addressable market, because now I'm not just playing a game and spending money in in-app purchases. I'm actually buying assets that, if I play these assets with my friend and improve them, they might be worth more over time, and that would make me stay a longer period of time.
Right. No, for sure. I think a big problem in that is tokenomics, right? Like, how do you get a digital economy started when you have, these tokens, and these tokens are supposed to be doing this thing, but there's speculators, there's investors, there's players, etc. Have you seen one thing that excites you, even if it's just getting started, that you think is really interesting, or possibly just a game?
Well, I think wherever you have liquidity, you will have speculators. Like, you will have to treat that as another lever that you expect in the game, right?
Right.
And I think what a lot of the game designers realized is that tokenizing an asset basically gives asset full permission of what to do with it. They may keep it,
Mhm.
they may reinvest in the game, they may give it to someone, they may sell it, they might buy a lot of it and attempt to flip it. So I think that the game designers are carefully gating how and when assets are tokenized within the game economy, because that's essentially giving people permission to leave the economy. Um, yeah, when you tokenize it. So I'm expecting a lot of hybrid models where, for example, your progress, you're getting progress are in-game resources that aren't tokenized, and then at
Mm,
some point, maybe at a certain progression level, or when you reach a certain amount worth of an asset, then you can
mm,
tokenize it, and then you can trade it in an internal marketplace, or
mm,
maybe if it leaves the custodial wallet out on custodial world, maybe it gets stacked some amount. So there's different ways to do this design wise, and I think we're just going to see a lot of experiments on how these are done.
no, for sure. I think it's happening now. One that I'm interested in is Meiji with Sinjin. We talked to them last week, and they are taking essentially just the Axie Infinity model, mixing it with poker, this poker background, and then making it so that NFT inflation is not controlled by the ecosystem, but controlled by the game developers themselves. I think we're starting to
Yep.
see a lot more of that. Of like,
Yep.
you just can't give the community full reign of the economy, because that
Yeah.
just doesn't really work in real life as well.
Yeah.
Is there one game that you're in particular looking forward to launching, and or seeing how their tokenomics works in the long run?
So there's a bunch of games, but one that I've been paying to recently is the Machines Arena by Directive Games. So this is the
Mm,
first like non-Axie IP that's coming out on the Ronin network, and it's kind of like top-down, like Overwatch-ish kind of gameplay, and it's very light on the Web3 elements.
Right.
So people are gonna see that it's a team-based shooter. It's easy to get into, and then they're not introducing the Web3 elements until kind of later in the game. And yeah, I think it's promising. But even though it's kind of a Web 2.5 game, you already see the Web3 part of the community, the different esports teams in the Ronin network. They're
Mm,
already playing the game. They're treating it as their own game because it's launching on Ronin. So you're
right.
seeing an incredible amount of ownership from these players, even though they actually don't own any assets yet. And I think that's just been incredible to watch so far.
Mm. You talk about esports. Like, do you think esports in Web3 is going to be much bigger than esports in Web2, and how will they differ?
I think that esports and Web3 are actually a really, really good fit because if you think about being able to give out rewards to people, which is something very native to
Right.
Web3, I think that the esports model, the competitive model in general, is something that works well. Like it's hard for you to really give out rewards to everyone, but if you can set out a prize pool that is, X percentage of your revenue, and then distribute that to like the top X number of players in the game, it's just a model that fits really well. Now combined with crypto, where you can give out these as release like instantaneously, like go finish a tournament, finish a quest, smart contract releases tokens, and people can get paid immediately after that, right? And yeah,
Right.
so I think that esports and Web3 are actually a really, really good fit.
Do you think, what parts of esports do you think it affects the most? Because there's obviously multiple sides of it, right? Where it's like the actual sport and then the audience. I think that the audience piece is something that has been lacking in the past. With we need more incentives to reward users with ownership, right? I'm a big NBA fan, the Warriors fan. If I can get a jersey, or knowing that I can go see a real game, or knowing that there's this kind of framework laid out where I don't necessarily see with esports yet, but I think Web3 adds on to that. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think the most powerful part of esports is actually the fandom and the passion it creates, right?
Right.
And it has the ability to really kind of connect the game with its passionate fan base through play competitive teams. So I think we're going to see a model where you're combining aspects of loyalty, like we're no
Mm,
stranger to loyalty points, rewards, etc., right? And combining that with like being able to sell digital merchandise, for example,
mm,
to your fan base. So I think that that poses a very interesting way to attract revenue. I think in Web 2, it's been very hard for the esports teams to generate revenue from the, I would say, like in-game items themselves. So they've been very
right,
reliant, for example, on either the prize pools or the sponsorship. So it's been
right.
hard to scale that business. But if you're actually able to sell digital merchandise because you're kind of, you know you have ownership in the game somehow, or the assets of the game, or you have the right to be able to sell assets related to that game. So I think that would be very
Mm,
powerful if you can work with game IP like that, because the community collectively owns the game economy if it's set up that way.
right. I mean, one thing that I like to think about is I love the NBA, but I don't play in the NBA. Like, I can't really go
Yep,
onto the court and play. But with gaming, that is completely different because I can
for
not
sure.
only watch something, but I can also play it. And like you mentioned, if you can sell assets that are inoperable with the game, it was specifically to that esports team, I just can imagine that fan base, the fandom just exploding, which obviously helps the game explode, the economy explode, etc. So that's something that I'm very passionate about. Something that I wanted to ask you as well, talking about entering into gaming ecosystems, how would you
Yep.
recommend someone who is from a developing country learn more about Web3 games, these ecosystems, and how they can get involved and ultimately benefit from them, outside of joining YGG, of course, which everyone should join?
Yeah, so I would say just get into a community and get started. This is how I started with it, right? And of course, now you can do this with communities like YGG, but it's something that people have been asking for the last few years. It's like community, join a Discord, participate in the mint. Like you really have to participate in that ecosystem to really understand it. It's one of those things where if you're just watching from outside, it looks kind of silly. But when you participate from the inside, you know how strong the fandom is and the power of ownership is. And it's really like being part of an Web3 community. I think really is the way you think about your relating to community when you're making your game,
Mm.
and I think that kind of relating is very very powerful.
No, for sure. Well, I know that like free mints add on to that. What are your thoughts on free mints? Like, how do you see them being evolving or staying the same in the future?
Yeah, free mints are. I think this is a meta that like Gabe has been perpetuating. Started with
Right.
Gaku, and now it's been incredibly hard to basically charge for a mint. So I think free
Yeah.
mints are good in that it really has the ability to widen your community to be interested
Mm.
in trying out a particular game. However, now that I mean, if there's a lot of focus on like what the floor price of that NFT is, then it may be self-defeating. So for example, people think that a game with a high like floor price of an NFT is better than one with a lower
Mm.
floor price because it's more valuable. And yeah, that ultimately might be self-defeating. So I think that if you're doing a free mint, you also have to be very careful of what does that mint represent in your game, or what does that value of that asset also tell about your game. So it's something that you have to consider very carefully. And you also have to think about the timing of when
Mm.
you're releasing assets. I think that when NFTs were pretty early, people would release the NFTs and build community maybe years before the game was made, right? And I don't
Right.
think that's really as permissible now. I think now if you release an NFT, I think a game has to be on the horizon, or else like
Mm.
people will get restless and just move somewhere else, right?
Right. No, for sure. I mean, you definitely happened in the past, and games not launching, and communities just
Yeah,
really wanting the game out. I mean, and it has happened before in Web 2, right? Where people they promise
yeah,
a
for sure.
game and it's not the same. Things definitely have to change. What do you ultimately think is the biggest barrier right now for Web3 gaming? Like, is it the onboarding? Is it the user acquisition? I know we talked a little bit about that before.
I don't think it's onboarding or it's user acquisition. It's that
Mm.
the business the business model has not been gone down to a formula yet. So like when the business model is down to a formula, then people will create lots and lots of content around that
Mm.
formula because they think that formula will make money. But therein also lies the big opportunity because, for example, when the formula was made by like Supercell and King and others in 2014 to 16, it was incredibly hard to break into that God kind of sitting on top of that industry. And now I would dare say, like, even though there's a lot of really smart people in Web3 gaming, no one really owns it yet. Like, there's no
Mm.
supercell of Web3 gaming yet, right?
Right.
Yeah, there's no Roblox of Web3 gaming yet. And like, that is the biggest barrier, but that is also the biggest opportunity.
When do you think that ultimately will arise? Like, I think that, there's been a lot of changes, right, in the last even 6 months in Web3 gaming. When does that first breakout game come to you? You think?
I think it's going to be within the next 12 months.
12 months.
So,
Okay.
yeah, within the next 12 months, I think. Yeah.
Okay. How do you see that? Like, what does a breakout game look to you? Is it the users, the daily active wallets? Is it just kind of like the NFT prices? What is that statistic that you put to a breaking out game?
Probably the ratio of daily active users to active wallets.
Okay.
Because if you have a lot of daily active users and you have almost no active wallets, then it's basically a free game, right?
Mm.
So you need to have a reason to funnel your millions of users, and like a lot of top games know how to get millions of users. It's not hard at this point because there's a formula. People know how to do user
Right.
acquisition. Distribution is like prevalent within both like PC or mobile. So getting millions of users at the top funnel is easy. Being able to convert that to people with wallets, like, is the hard part, and will
Mm.
really know what a good Web3 game is.
Mm. Have you seen any methods on targeting those wallets? I know that the daily active wallets conversation has been starting to come up because that's where you ultimately are making a lot of your money. Have you seen anything successful to that, or is that just organically making users ultimately convert to wallets, whether it be a Web 2 or Web 3 user?
I guess a big part of it is when a player gets an asset in the game and they want to trade
Mm,
it, right? So it
mm,
might be that at first that asset isn't an NFT. Visit the market, then you might create the NFT or create the wallet. Or, for example, if a player signs up and makes their first Soulbound token achievement, then they have to create a wallet as well. So it's where basically meet the like the Web3, the virtual economy, the real virtual economy,
right.
where yeah, and if you start caring about that, then you're hooked, right? It's not just another game anymore.
Right. You're part of the community, you're part of the ecosystem, and you're part of
Yeah,
something much bigger of than yourself, which I think is something that YGG is ultimately doing as well, is also helping games figure out, right, like how you can ultimately change these individuals from users to daily active or to wallets that are actually
yeah.
participating in your ecosystem. I think that there's still a big missing factor of like data and being able to analyze those metrics. Have you seen anything that like has really pushed out something innovative in that space of analyzing how games are doing per daily active wallets or daily active users?
Yes, but that's alpha, so I'm not gonna reveal
All
it.
right. Well, it's a little bit
Let's just
obvious.
say that a lot of really smart people are already building startups that kind of figure out what the data analytics and user acquisition stack in Web3 are going to look like. Like, there's now a lot of energy in solving that problem.
Right. I'm sure you're familiar with. I was talking to Kevin from Victory. Who I think he's starting one of those companies. He mentioned to me yesterday that there was a FIFA analytics company that just sold for like 112 million dollars, just focused on FIFA analytics, totally off chain. There's nothing really that you
Crazy.
can benefit from outside of just ads,
Yeah.
right? I think obviously Web3 changes that entire aspect. And I think there's also been I've talked to um, uh, Chase from Arcadia. I think that's something that you're also kind of someone
That's right.
involved in. And there's a big move as well to like ecosystem based. I think projects like Magic,
Yep.
Treasure
Yep.
DAO, Arcadia as well. How do you see that moving forward? Because I see when everybody bands together, it's much easier to create something that rather than everybody do it themselves.
Ecosystem-based projects, I think, yeah, it's a great way to create community. Ultimately, you'll still need a hit game, and I would say the biggest like the biggest risk of an ecosystem-based play is that if the game is not on your ecosystem, then people might leave. But it's a great way for community to band together, definitely consume different types of content, have assets that the community cares about that can move in different kind of content backgrounds or different games with interoperable assets. Definitely makes sense within those ecosystems. But yeah, you're still at the end of the day. And what I think is that when the hits come, the top maybe three, four, five become the actual platforms. Because if the hits come, now whatever blockchain they're on becomes the default blockchain, right? Or whatever messaging protocol they're on becomes the default messaging protocol. So I think that in virtual worlds, the top games like the Fortnites of Web3 basically become the de facto platforms, and they can king make or render irrelevant like ecosystem plays. Like the ecosystem that game is on, basically, the ones that end up winning.
I was watching yesterday the Pixels kind of live stream on. They're trying to do exactly that, right? UCG and become that ecosystem. Um, I envision UGC being huge. It is already huge in Web 2. How do you foresee it playing a role in Web 3?
Yeah, UGC and creators are definitely going to be a part of it. UGC still, I would say it took Roblox how many years to take off? Like six from launch, and Fortnite took a few years, and that's not even counting the 5 years that they were in development, right?
Right.
Before the battle royale mode came out. So it's incredibly hard to really jumpstart uh, um, any platform with UGC. But once you get going, then it's kind of hard to stop it. But yeah, even with like the UGC platform games, like Sandbox is probably the oldest of them, but there's a bunch of others in Web3. It shows that you still need to put in a ton of effort to make content that people will love. Like a lot of the third-party games in Nintendo will not matter, right? If Mario isn't there or Zelda isn't there or now Pokemon. So yeah, at the end of the day, you still need that hit, and I think with the top Web3 games becoming virtual economies, they will be the de facto platforms for others to build on once they start having that dominance. So I think more than app stores, it will be the top game economies, virtual economies, and probably the blockchains underneath them. That will be the dominant platform.
Default. So I think YGG emphasizes community, and I think that that's something that a lot of games have been looking to emphasize more, especially as they come out with creator programs. I'm sure you've seen it. Where do you think that evolves to in the future? It sounds like just content creators are getting a bigger stake in these projects.
Yeah, I think it's great because these games are looking for ways to reward creators that can make the project more valuable as a whole. And I think that like declaring even at the start that these creators are valuable and a big share of the pie is really good. That said, the best way to get these creators in is basically have really good content and then give them the tools to create more content on top of it, right? So yeah, I think that if a hit game comes in, it becomes a platform, and then it actually takes the time to develop the tools to give it in the hands of the community. Then the community will come up with like something really great. So yeah, like a YGG, we also care about creators. We actually even have an artist guild within YGG that create art for like some of our different projects that we're part of. And yeah, I think that like becoming a metaverse creator basically is going to be a full-time job in sometime in the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what you were saying, right? That there's going to be so many different jobs in gaming next 5-10 years that are not live today, but will probably be live per the advancements of AI, which is both scary and fun at the same time. Because I would like to see my niece, be able to be something in a video game and make money. I think that's something that I would make a lot of people happy, and games make people happy, right? Do you have any final thoughts on YGG blockchain gaming, and finally, how can we follow up and keep updated with YGG and yourself in this space?
Final thoughts. I think that this has been really the most interesting time to be alive and be part of the industry. Of course, there's a lot of uncertainty, but for me, like an entrepreneur, a builder, that's also where the most fun is. Right? We have the opportunity to shape what virtual economies look like for the next decade plus. And yeah, to me, that's more exciting. That's a more exciting proposition than simply like being able to entertainment built game industry into like $180 billion industry. I think that virtual worlds are going to turn it into $1 trillion industry, and I'm just incredibly lucky to be part of it in some way.
I couldn't agree more. What are some of the socials that we can follow YGG you on, so that everybody that's listening can stay updated to what's going to be happening?
Twitter at YieldGuild, discord.gg/YGG are easiest way to find us. We are also present on YouTube, a lot of other socials, and Google my name, Gabby Dizon. I'm not that hard to find.
You're definitely not. Gabby, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. This conversation has been super insightful to learn more about what the future of Web3 gaming can be. You're definitely an innovator and trailblazer in the space, and I foresee that happening 5, 10, 15, maybe even 20 years from now. And in terms of our listeners, we'll keep on bringing you more interesting guests that are disrupting the Web3 gaming space. So don't forget to follow our channels as well, and stay tuned to the next episode. And if you're a game developer looking to diversify your game economics, we have a solution for you. Reach out at renft.io and let's talk about NFT rentals. Until next time, and again, thank you so much, Gabby. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.